Have you ever walked through a city and felt an inexplicable pull towards certain streets or squares, as if the pavement itself was guiding your steps? What if I told you that's not just coincidence, it's by design? For centuries, cities have been quietly engineered to shape how we move, interact, and even think, with layouts so cleverly crafted that most of us never notice the invisible hands at work. From the winding alleys of medieval towns meant to confuse invaders to the sprawling boulevards of modern metropolises designed to control crowds, urban spaces are far more manipulative than they appear. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on these secret blueprints, the hidden rules written in brick and concrete that dictate where we go, how we gather, and even how we behave. Think about the last time you felt naturally drawn to a park bench or hesitated before crossing a seemingly empty plaza. Those instincts weren't random. Architects and planners have long used subtle tricks like narrowing sidewalks to herd foot traffic or positioning monuments to command attention, to influence our choices without us realizing it. Some cities employ hostile architecture, like spikes on ledges or oddly angled benches, to discourage loitering. Others use light, sound, and even scent to create atmospheres that calm or energize us on demand. These techniques aren't just modern inventions. Ancient Rome built its forums to magnify the voices of speakers, while Victorian London redesigned streets to make riots harder to organize. The goal: to control behavior, often without anyone noticing the strings being pulled. But why does this matter to you? Because these designs shape everything from where protests can gather to how safe you feel on a dimly lit street. They determine whether a neighborhood thrives or withers, whether people connect or pass like shadows. And once you see these patterns, you'll start spotting them everywhere, the way a shopping mall funnels you past stores, or how a train station's layout can ease panic during an emergency. This video isn't just about uncovering secrets, it's about reclaiming awareness. By the time we're done, you'll walk through your city with new eyes, decoding the silent language of its streets. So let's begin this journey into the architecture of control and discover who's really steering your steps. The story of cities built to control us begins not with concrete and steel, but with dust and stone thousands of years ago. Take the rigid grid of ancient Roman cities where straight roads met at perfect right angles. This wasn't just about efficiency, it was about power. Straight streets let soldiers move quickly to crush rebellions, while the central forum became a stage for political theater, designed to awe citizens into obedience. Even the winding alleys of medieval Europe served a purpose. Their maze-like layouts confused invaders, but they also made it harder for townspeople to gather in large, unruly crowds. Then came thinkers like Jeremy Bentham, who took this idea to chilling extremes. His Panopticon, a circular prison where inmates could always be watched but never knew when, wasn't just about surveillance. It was a blueprint for psychological control, proving that architecture could get inside people's heads. Though few actual panopticons were built, the concept seeped into city planning. Wide boulevards like those in Paris replaced cramped streets after revolutions, not just for beauty but to prevent barricades. Even the humble park bench evolved, its placement, length, and even curvature studied to encourage desirable behavior, like short stays rather than loitering. What's fascinating is how these designs mirror the societies that created them. Ancient Rome's grids reflected its military precision, while medieval chaos mirrored feudal instability. Fast forward to the industrial era, and you'll find factory towns where worker housing was clustered just close enough to the mills to hear the whistle, a built-in alarm clock. Every brick, every curve was a silent enforcer of social rules, and today we've just swapped stone for smarter tools. Cameras replace watchtowers and algorithms predict crowd movements, but the goal remains the same, shaping behavior, one streetlight or sidewalk at a time. The real question isn't whether our cities influence us, it's who gets to decide how. Because when you peel back the layers, urban design is never neutral. It's a conversation in concrete, whispering who belongs, who's watched, and who holds the reins. And once you hear that whisper, you'll never unhear it, whether you're walking through a shopping mall, a subway tunnel, or your own neighborhood. Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon wasn't just a prison, it was a revelation in human psychology, wrapped in brick and iron. Picture a circular building with cells arranged like spokes around a central tower. Guards could see every prisoner, but the inmates could never tell if they were actually being watched at any given moment. That uncertainty, that gnawing feeling of invisible eyes, became the real prison. People would regulate their own behavior, policing themselves more strictly than any guard ever could. What started as an experiment in incarceration soon leaked into everyday life, reshaping how we design spaces where control matters. Take the modern shopping mall, for instance. Those wide, open atriums aren't just for aesthetics. They create sightlines where security can monitor crowds effortlessly. Even when you don't see cameras, their potential presence makes you think twice before lingering too long or acting out. Office spaces followed suit, swapping private cubicles for glass-walled open floors where productivity feels transparent. The message is clear: someone might be watching, so stay in line. But here's the twist: these designs thrive on ambiguity. Unlike medieval dungeons with visible chains, the Panopticon's power came from never confirming whether surveillance was active. That same uncertainty now hums beneath our cities. When you pass a CCTV camera or notice a police drone overhead, you're experiencing Bentham's legacy. It doesn't matter if anyone's actually reviewing the footage. The possibility alone changes how we move through space. What's chilling is how willingly we've adopted this logic. Schools install security pods with panoramic views of hallways. Public parks position benches facing surveillance towers disguised as art installations. We've normalized architectures of suspicion, trading privacy for perceived safety. Yet history shows us the trade-off isn't new. Ancient Chinese watchtowers along the Silk Road relied on the same psychology, merchants behaving better simply because a guard might be looking. The real genius or cruelty of the Panopticon model is its efficiency. Why hire 100 guards when design can make people guard themselves? Today's tech just scales this principle. Smart streetlights with facial recognition, subway turnstiles that log every swipe, they're all descendants of Bentham's tower. And as these systems grow smarter, the watching grows subtler. The next time you hesitate before jaywalking on an empty street or lower your voice in a whisper lobby, ask yourself, are you obeying the rules or the architecture? Mid-19th century Paris was a tinderbox, narrow alleys where revolutionaries could vanish, labyrinthine streets perfect for barricades, whole neighborhoods that could erupt into rebellion overnight. Then came Baron Haussmann, clutching blueprints and imperial orders. Under Napoleon III, he didn't just renovate the city, he surgically dismantled its revolutionary potential. Medieval slums were razed, replaced by broad, arrow-straight boulevards radiating from central plazas. The official story: modernization, sanitation, grandeur. The truth: these boulevards were too wide for rebels to barricade, too exposed for crowds to gather unseen. Cannon fire could sweep them clean in minutes. Haussmann's genius or ruthlessness lay in how he weaponized beauty. Those iconic Parisian facades with their uniform cream stone weren't just aesthetic, they were psychological. The grandeur was meant to awe ordinary citizens into compliance, while the displaced working-class families were pushed to the outskirts, fracturing tight-knit communities where dissent festered. Cafes and theaters lined the new avenues, yes, but their wide sidewalks served as parade routes for troops, not protest marches. Even the parks were strategic, open green spaces where snipers had clear sightlines. This wasn't just about controlling Paris, it was a playbook copied across continents. When British planners rebuilt London after riots, they borrowed Haussmann's templates. Later, American cities used slum clearance programs to break up black and immigrant neighborhoods under the guise of progress. The pattern repeats, call it urban renewal, but watch where the wrecking ball lands. Always on the marginalized, always where resistance might grow, yet there's irony in Haussmann's legacy. Those same boulevards designed to stifle rebellion eventually became stages for it, from the Paris Commune to the protests of 1968. Because here's the thing about cities built to control people, they're never finished. Humans adapt, alleyways reappear in shadowy corners, graffiti reclaims sterile walls. And every time a crowd floods one of Haussmann's grand avenues, chanting for change, they prove something profound, that no design, no matter how cunning, can permanently cage the human spirit. Walk down any major city street today, and you might notice something unsettling: metal spikes jutting from flat surfaces where someone might rest, benches divided by armrests too close together to lie down, or even sprinklers timed to drench doorways at night. These aren't accidents or odd design choices. They're weapons disguised as architecture, part of a growing trend called hostile design, aimed at pushing certain people out of public spaces without saying a word. Take the humble park bench. In theory, it's a place to sit, relax, maybe eat lunch. But redesign it with segmented seating, slanted surfaces, or cold, slippery materials, and suddenly it's no longer a place to linger. Cities from London to Tokyo have adopted these tweaks to deter homelessness, framing them as anti-vagrancy measures. Yet the message is clear: some bodies are welcome in public space, while others are quietly but forcefully told to move along. Then there's the sonic warfare of urban design: high-frequency sound emitters called mosquito devices, inaudible to most adults but piercing to younger ears. Installed near shopping centers or train stations, they target teens loitering after hours. Or consider the rise of leaning bars replacing benches entirely, forcing people to perch briefly rather than sit comfortably. Even nature gets weaponized. Think of jagged rocks under bridges or fragrant plants like lavender, chosen not for beauty but because their strong scent discourages lingering. What makes these tactics so insidious is their deniability. Unlike no loitering signs that openly criminalize behavior, hostile design operates in whispers. It lets cities claim they're not banning anyone, they're just optimizing space. But the effect is the same: a hierarchy etched into concrete where comfort becomes a privilege, not a right. This isn't just about benches or spikes. It's about who gets to exist unbothered in the shared spaces we all fund. When a bus shelter's roof is angled to drip rainwater onto seating, or public trash cans are redesigned to make dumpster diving impossible, these choices reveal whose pain is deemed acceptable. And while some argue these measures reduce crime or maintain cleanliness, history shows a darker pattern. From ugly laws that once barred disabled people from public view to today's barriers that criminalize poverty by design. Yet resistance is growing. Artists in cities like Berlin have melted anti-homeless spikes into protest sculptures, while activists in Montreal cover hostile architecture with cushions and blankets, reclaiming space with acts of care. Because every time a spike is installed or a bench removed, it begs a question. What kind of cities do we want? Ones that police bodies through design, or ones that welcome rest, play, and humanity in all its forms? The answer isn't written in stone yet, but it's being built one brick, one bench, one brutal design choice at a time. Singapore stands as one of the most striking experiments in controlled urban living, a city where every tree, traffic light, and high rise seems to whisper the same message: order above all. Walk through its spotless streets, and you'll notice the absence of chaos: no litter, no graffiti, no jaywalking. But this didn't happen by accident. It's the result of decades of meticulous planning, where architecture and policy intertwine to shape behavior down to the smallest detail. Public housing estates, where 80% of residents live, aren't just buildings, they're social engineering tools. Ethnic quotas ensure racial integration, while shared courtyards and void decks, those open spaces beneath each block, are deliberately designed to force neighborly interaction. Even the placement of benches follows studies on optimal social distancing, encouraging contact without crowding. Then there's the Smart Nation initiative, where surveillance isn't just visible, it's woven into the fabric of daily life. Lampposts double as sensors tracking foot traffic, drones monitor parks for unapproved gatherings, and facial recognition scans passengers at subway turnstiles. The government frames this as efficiency. Trash bins alert cleaners when full, traffic adjusts in real time to congestion. But critics see a darker edge, a system where straying from the script, whether by protesting or even loitering too long, triggers consequences. Fines for minor infractions, like chewing gum in public or feeding pigeons, reinforce the unspoken rule: compliance isn't optional. Yet what's fascinating is how Singapore weaponizes beauty to soften its control. Lush rooftop gardens and gleaming shopping districts distract from the lack of political dissent. The famous Super Tree Grove, with its alien-like vertical gardens, isn't just a tourist attraction, it's a symbol of nature tamed, just like the society below. Even the humidity feels managed, with covered walkways ensuring citizens never need to dash unpredictably through rain. The trade-offs are stark. Crime rates are negligible, public transit runs like clockwork, and ethnic tensions stay muted by design. But creativity often withers under such precision. Underground artists speak of escape tunnels, hidden bars or pop-up galleries that exist just outside the system's sightlines. Meanwhile, younger generations chafe at the rigidity, asking why a city so advanced feels emotionally sterile. Singapore proves that control can breed safety and prosperity. But it also begs a haunting question. When a city runs too smoothly, what gets lost in the gears? For every resident who praises the efficiency, another misses the messy, unpredictable humanity that most cities can't or won't design away. Las Vegas doesn't just entertain, it hijacks your senses. Step inside any casino, and the first thing you'll notice is the absence of clocks. Time becomes irrelevant under artificial twilight, where the sun never sets and the outside world fades into oblivion. Maze-like pathways twist and turn, deliberately avoiding straight lines to keep you wandering past slot machines and card tables. Even the carpets are optical illusions, their dizzying patterns designed to make you look down, just long enough to miss the exits. And then there's the free alcohol, flowing freely to lower inhibitions while keeping you rooted to the seat. This isn't just decoration, it's a psychological trap, perfected over decades to turn casual visitors into captive spenders. But the manipulation doesn't stop at the casino doors. The entire strip is a carefully choreographed stage. Resorts cluster tightly together, their entrances spaced just far enough to make walking between them feel exhausting, unless you're lured inside another air-conditioned labyrinth. The Bellagio fountains aren't just a spectacle, they're anchors, strategically placed to pull crowds like magnets, ensuring foot traffic flows where profits are highest. Even the sidewalks are subtly sloped, nudging you toward overpriced shops and restaurants. And let's talk about those towering ceilings in hotel lobbies, grand enough to make you feel small, insignificant, and more likely to splurge as compensation. What's chilling is how seamlessly these tricks blend into the spectacle. The volcano at the Mirage erupts on schedule, not just to dazzle but to create a rhythm that keeps you outside and spending longer. Fake skies painted on indoor promises disguise the passage of time, while the scent of freshly baked cookies pumped through vents triggers impulsive snacking. Every detail, from the placement of ATMs to the absence of visible staircases, whispers the same message: stay, play, forget. Yet Vegas reveals a deeper truth about urban design. Pleasure and control aren't opposites. They're partners. The city's architects borrowed from Disney's playbook, crafting environments so immersive that critical thinking melts away. But where Disney sells fantasy, Vegas sells addiction wrapped in neon and free cocktails. The real jackpot isn't at the slots, it's the billions extracted from visitors who never realize how expertly they've been played. The lesson here isn't just about casinos. It's about the power of design to shape desire itself. From shopping malls that hide benches to keep you browsing to theme parks that herd crowds with weenies, those iconic landmarks visible from anywhere. Las Vegas is just the most brazen example. Next time you feel inexplicably drawn to a store's back corner or lose hours in a sprawling airport terminal, ask yourself, who's really steering your steps? The answer might be written in the walls. Brasilia rises from the Brazilian plains like a concrete dream frozen in time, a city built not from the ground up but from the sky down. When architects Oscar Niemeyer and Lucio Costa sketched their utopia in the 1960s, they imagined a capital shaped like an airplane, its wings stretching with pristine symmetry. Every ministry, every plaza, every curve of glass and steel was plotted with mathematical precision. But step into those vast plazas today, and you'll feel it immediately, the eerie silence of a city that forgot to account for human spontaneity. The grand monumental axis, wide enough to land a jetliner, wasn't designed for strolling. It was built for speed, for cars zipping past monolithic government buildings where decisions were made far above street level. Sidewalks where they existed felt like afterthoughts. Parks were placed at rigid intervals, not where people might naturally gather. Even the residential superblocks, with their uniform rows of apartment towers, discouraged chance encounters. Everything was assigned a zone: work here, sleep there, shop in this designated box. The result, a metropolis that felt less like a living community and more like a scale model someone forgot to populate. What went wrong wasn't the vision of modernity. It was the arrogance of assuming humans would conform to lines on a blueprint, without narrow alleyways for impromptu cafes or uneven squares where street performers might gather. Brasilia's residents found themselves adrift in a sea of concrete. The city's very perfection became its flaw. In older cities, chaos breeds connection. A crooked street invites exploration. A dead end sprouts a community garden. But Brasilia's rigid order left no room for improvisation. By sunset, government workers fled to satellite towns, leaving the utopian core as hollow as a stage set after the actor's exit. Yet Brasilia's failure taught urban planners a vital lesson. Control isn't the same as harmony. You can mandate where people live, but not how they'll laugh, argue, or share a meal. Later projects, from Copenhagen's bicycle-friendly curves to Barcelona's superblocks designed for play, would borrow Brasilia's boldness while remembering its fatal oversight that cities aren't machines. They're living ecosystems, and no amount of sweeping boulevards can replace the messy, vital pulse of human connection. The ghostly quiet of Brasilia's plazas whispers a warning to every futuristic city since, designed for the people who'll breathe life into your drawings or risk building a masterpiece no one wants to touch. Think about the last time you navigated a city grid versus a suburban maze. In one, you move with purpose, straight lines guiding you toward destinations, sidewalks inviting chance encounters. In the other, winding roads force slow, meandering drives with dead ends that feel like gentle rejections to outsiders. These aren't just aesthetic choices, they're behavioral blueprints. Grids like those in New York or Barcelona act as social catalysts. Their regularity creates predictability, encouraging walking and spontaneous interactions. Corner stores flourish, sidewalks buzz, and that density builds something intangible but vital: trust. Studies from urban sociology journals reveal that grid-based neighborhoods report higher levels of social cohesion. Residents recognize more faces, exchange more greetings, even borrow sugar more often. The design literally engineers familiarity. Now flip the script to cul-de-sacs. Those looping, isolated streets might lower crime rates by creating natural barriers. Strangers stick out and getaway routes vanish. But that security comes at a cost. Research from the University of California found that suburban layouts with fewer through streets reduce casual socializing by nearly 40%. Without foot traffic or shared pathways, neighbors become silhouettes behind garage doors. Kids play in fenced backyards instead of communal streets. The very design that fosters privacy also erodes the glue of community. Even street width whispers commands. Narrow lanes in ancient European villages force cars to slow, creating spaces where pedestrians dominate and conversations spill from cafes onto cobblestones. Wider arterials, like those in Los Angeles, prioritize speed over connection. Engines drown out chatter, and crosswalks feel like gauntlets. Noise maps correlate these widths with social behavior. Thinner streets hum with life, broad ones isolate. The most telling evidence lies in the exceptions. When Portland replaced a sprawling highway with a grid-like network of narrow streets, foot traffic tripled, and local businesses bloomed. Meanwhile, gated communities doubled down on labyrinthine layouts, their winding roads acting as moats against the unfamiliar. The lesson: every curb, every turn, every width is a silent social engineer. We shape our streets, and then without realizing it, they shape us. Close your eyes for a moment and listen to your city. That distant hum of traffic, the rhythmic click of heels on pavement, the muffled chatter from a cafe terrace, none of it is accidental. Urban planners have long known that sound shapes behavior as powerfully as sight, and they've weaponized this knowledge to craft invisible landscapes of noise and silence. Take London's Liverpool Street Station, where embedded speakers play birdsong so convincing, commuters instinctively slow their pace, soothed by the illusion of nature. Or Tokyo's Shinjuku district, where buildings clad in sound-absorbing panels turn roaring avenues into hushed corridors, subtly lowering stress levels in a city that never sleeps. Then there's the darker side of sonic control. High-pitched mosquito devices emitting frequencies only audible to those under 25, scattered teens from mall entrances without security lifting a finger. In Melbourne, certain train platforms broadcast classical music, not for culture, but because studies show it reduces vandalism and aggression. Even the cheerful babbling of public fountains serves a dual purpose, masking the growl of nearby traffic while creating pockets of artificial serenity that encourage shoppers to linger longer. But the most sophisticated manipulations happen beneath conscious notice. Barcelona's superblocks use trees and pavement textures to absorb echoes, making streets feel quieter even with the same noise levels. New York's Times Square deploys directional speakers that beam advertisements to precise spots, ensuring your ears aren't yours to command. And in Seoul, AI-powered soundscapes adjust in real time, dialing up lively music during rush hour, then switching to tranquil tones as evening falls, nudging moods like an invisible conductor. What's startling is how these techniques borrow from ancient wisdom. Medieval cathedrals used reverberant acoustics to amplify awe, while Mughal gardens channeled water's white noise to mask palace intrigues. Today's cities just do it with smarter tools. The question isn't whether sound influences us, it's who gets to script the soundtrack of our lives. Because when a fountain splash can sway where you sit, or a hidden speaker heard you like sheep, the city isn't just around you. It's inside your head. Light does more than illuminate our streets, it orchestrates our behavior with the precision of a conductor's baton. Walk through a bustling shopping district at night, and you'll notice how storefronts blaze with warm, golden hues, casting everything in a flattering glow. Those lights aren't just for visibility, they're calibrated to mimic sunset tones, triggering a primal response that lowers inhibitions and opens wallets. Studies from retail psychology journals reveal that customers spend nearly 20% more under this kind of lighting, lingering longer as their brains associate the warmth with comfort and safety. Flip the script to a dimly lit alleyway where flickering bulbs or stark white LEDs create pools of shadow spaces that feel instinctively unsafe, deterring foot traffic without a single "no trespassing" sign. Then there's the curious case of Japan's blue streetlights. In the early 2000s, railway stations and public squares began experimenting with cobalt-hued lamps, initially installed to deter vandalism by making veins harder to locate for drug users. But the unintended effect was staggering. Crime rates dropped, and even suicide attempts near train platforms plummeted. Researchers realized the color blue had a subconscious calming effect, slowing heart rates and reducing impulsive behavior. Now, cities from Glasgow to Taipei have adopted similar lighting in high-stress zones, turning public spaces into silent therapists, but the manipulation goes deeper. Modern offices now deploy circadian lighting systems that shift color temperature throughout the day, from energizing cool whites in the morning to soothing amber by late afternoon. These schemes don't just reduce eye strain, they hijack our biological clocks, squeezing out extra productivity by convincing our brains it's always prime working hours. Hospitals use similar tricks, with maternity wards bathing newborns in artificial dawns to regulate sleep cycles before they've even left the building. The most insidious part we rarely notice. Light's influence operates below conscious awareness, like a puppeteer hidden behind the curtain. Take adaptive streetlights in smart cities, which brighten as you approach, creating a path of least resistance, literally guiding your steps while leaving darker routes feeling unnerving. Or consider how gas stations use blindingly bright canopies to make drivers feel alert during late-night fill-ups, masking fatigue just long enough to tempt a candy bar at the register. Yet light's double-edged nature is its most fascinating quality. The same tool that herds shoppers can also heal. In Sweden, bus stops near senior centers are bathed in UV-free, happy lights during winter months, combating seasonal depression. Libraries in Finland install dynamic fixtures that dim slightly near reading nooks, subtly signaling quiet zones without shushing. Light can exclude or welcome, manipulate or mend, all depending on who holds the switch. So next time you pause under a street lamp or squint at a neon sign, ask yourself, is this light serving you or steering you? The answer might change how you see every glow in the night. In Shanghai, a pedestrian hesitates at a crosswalk as the light turns red. Before their foot even touches the asphalt, a facial recognition camera captures their face, flashes it on a nearby billboard with a mocking caption, and deducts points from their social credit score, all in under 3 seconds. This isn't dystopian fiction. It's China's next-generation urban design, where bricks and mortar merge with algorithms to create cities that don't just house citizens, but judge them. The social credit system transforms every park bench, subway turnstile, and public square into an invisible courtroom, with architecture serving as both jury and bailiff. High-scoring citizens glide through life with golden keys, priority access to luxury housing complexes, expedited hospital appointments, even VIP lanes at airports. Their children get preference in top schools, and their faces unlock discounted metro fares, but stumble into the untrustworthy category by jaywalking, missing a bill payment, or posting harmful content online, and the city itself turns cold. Suddenly, the high-speed train booking app declines your card. Your apartment complex's smart gate recognizes your face and stays locked. Even the bike share docks refuse to release a bicycle, leaving you stranded as higher-scoring neighbors breeze past. The genius or horror of this system lies in its subtlety. Unlike East Germany's blunt Stasi surveillance or Victorian London's overt moral policing, China's control operates through convenience. Want to rent a car? Your score must unlock that privilege. Dream of a seaside vacation? Airlines check your rating before selling tickets. By tying basic freedoms to behavior metrics, the state doesn't need barbed wire. It weaponizes FOMO, fear of missing out, on the curated perks of compliance. Yet the most chilling innovation isn't the cameras or algorithms, it's how urban design amplifies their power. In smart cities like Hangzhou, lampposts double as Wi-Fi hubs that log device connections, mapping who meets whom in public parks. Apartment elevators in Shenzhen only stop at floors your social credit permits, physically segregating trustworthy residents from risky ones. Even park benches get in on the act. Some now feature weight sensors that alert authorities if someone lingers too long, flagging potential homeless individuals. This isn't just surveillance, it's spatial sorting, where your worth determines your access to the city itself. Ancient Rome had its class divisions, Victorian London its moral geography, but never before has a society engineered such precise, real-time control over who gets to exist where. And as other nations experiment with their own versions, from Dubai's happiness meters to Singapore's mandatory trace-together tokens, China's experiment raises a harrowing question: when cities become algorithms, who gets written out of the code? Step into Disneyland's main street, you say, and you'll immediately feel it: the warmth of the cobblestones underfoot, the smell of fresh popcorn drifting through spotless air, the perfectly scaled buildings that make you feel like you've stepped into a storybook. But here's the secret: none of it is accidental. Those buildings use forced perspective, with upper floors shrinking to make the castle appear impossibly grand. The spontaneous street performances run on military-grade schedules. Even the trash cans are spaced precisely 30 feet apart, the calculated maximum distance a person will hold onto garbage before littering. This isn't urban design, it's behavioral choreography disguised as whimsy. What's fascinating is how this model escaped the park gates. From Times Square's sanitized pedestrian plazas to Dubai's indoor ski slopes, cities increasingly chase the Disney effect: safe, predictable, and relentlessly commercial. Historic districts get pressure washed into cartoon versions of themselves, with chain stores replacing local shops to create what critics call geography of nowhere. Barcelona's once gritty Gothic quarter now hosts Disney-style, living statues who rotate shifts, while London's Camden Market trades its punk roots for Instagram-friendly food halls. The message is clear: messy authenticity is out, controlled, spend-ready charm is in. But the trade-offs are steep. When Seattle's Pike Place market banned buskers without permits, or Lisbon's Alfama district replaced family-run taverns with frozen sangria stands, they didn't just change the scenery, they rewrote the social script. Genuine street life, with its arguments, laughter, and unexpected encounters, gets replaced by performative cheer. Sociologists call this the Starbucks effect, or when neighborhoods become so polished, they repel the very communities that gave them character in the first place. Yet Disney's most powerful trick might be how it makes control feel voluntary. Those winding queues aren't just for crowd management, they're psychological tools, using switchbacks to prevent line cutting and strategically placed TVs to distract from wait times. Apply this to cities and you get happy maps that steer tourists down approved routes, or hostel benches that discourage resting anywhere but designated spending zones. The genius and tragedy is how seamlessly we accept these nudges, mistaking engineered ease for organic choice. The danger isn't themed entertainment. It's when entire cities start treating citizens like guests who must never see backstage. Because real urban magic doesn't come from flawless facades. It blooms in the cracks between control, the improvised street concert, the grumpy local diner that refuses to rebrand, the alley mural that wasn't on the Chamber of Commerce's checklist. Disneyland works because it's honest about being a fantasy. When real cities play the same game, we risk losing something far more precious than dirt. We lose the right to be inconvenient. Prute Igo wasn't just a housing project, it was a cautionary tale etched in steel and concrete, a monument to good intentions gone horribly wrong when the first tenants moved into St. Louis gleaming high-rises in 1954, the brochures promised vertical neighborhoods for modern living. Architects had stripped away ornate flourishes in favor of brutalist efficiency, convinced that clean lines and strict order would uplift the poor. But the reality was something darker. The buildings towered over the city like prison blocks, their endless identical corridors offering no places to gather, no shops to stumble upon, no benches to rest on. Elevators only stopped every third floor, forcing residents to navigate dim stairwells where danger lurked. What was meant to be utopia became a maze of isolation and fear. The fatal flaw wasn't the poverty of its residents, it was the poverty of imagination in its design. By eliminating stoops where mothers might chat, shared courtyards where kids could play under watchful eyes, or corner stores where owners knew customers by name, Prute Igo severed the fragile threads that bind communities. Windows were too narrow to let in proper light, walls too thin to muffle screams. Maintenance collapsed as budgets were slashed, leaving broken pipes and burnt-out lights to fester. Gangs claimed the voids where social life should have flourished, turning stairwells into territories and empty apartments into hideouts. The very features meant to streamline life, the separation of spaces, the rigid uniformity accelerated its unraveling. Yet the most damning evidence came in 1972, when the city itself admitted defeat. Dynamite charges reduced the towers to rubble in a televised spectacle, their collapse symbolizing more than just a failed housing experiment. It was the death of an ideology, the belief that humans could be engineered into order through concrete alone. Similar projects from Chicago's Cabrini Green to Paris' Banlieues would follow Prute Igo's grim blueprint, repeating its mistakes with eerie precision. But amidst the rubble lay a vital lesson. Control without dignity is a ticking time bomb. People don't just need roofs overhead, they need agency, beauty, and places to breathe. Later successes like Vienna's social housing with its flower-filled balconies or Copenhagen's co-op communities with shared kitchens prove that structure and empathy aren't opposites. They're partners. The difference: these spaces ask residents not just where they'll sleep, but how they'll live. Prute Igo's ghost lingers in every sterile plaza and soulless tower that prioritizes control over connection. Its ruins whisper a question to every urban planner since: are you building walls or weaving webs? The answer determines whether a neighborhood will flourish or implode under the weight of its own design. There's a reason why a stroll through Central Park feels like hitting a reset button for your mood. And it's not just the fresh air. Cities have quietly weaponized nature itself as a tool for social control. But here's the twist: this might be the kind of manipulation we actually welcome. Take Singapore's Supertree Grove, where 50-foot-tall artificial trees draped in real ferns aren't just a tourist attraction, they're a psychological release valve. Studies from the University of Illinois found that apartment buildings surrounded by greenery report 52% fewer violent crimes than identical structures surrounded by concrete. It's as if sunlight filtering through leaves doesn't just nourish plants, it drains aggression from human hearts. This isn't accidental. Urban planners call it biophilic design, the art of embedding nature into cities to steer behavior. Oslo transformed a crime-ridden square simply by replacing cracked pavement with birch trees and bubbling fountains, cutting assaults by nearly 40%. Tokyo's train stations now feature stress relief gardens, where commuters can decompress amid bamboo thickets before boarding packed carriages. Even something as subtle as replacing cold metal benches with warm wooden slats has measurable effects. People sit longer, talk more, and leave trash behind less often. Nature, it seems, doesn't just decorate cities, it reprograms their inhabitants. But the real genius lies in how biophilic design subverts expectations of control. Unlike spike strips or surveillance cameras which scream, "Don't," a well-placed grove of trees whispers, "Pause." Barcelona's superblocks, those car-free zones carpeted with wildflowers, don't restrict movement. They redirect it, enticing pedestrians to meander rather than march. The High Line in New York turned an abandoned rail track into an elevated meadow where tourists and locals alike unconsciously slow their pace, soothed by the rustle of prairie grasses at eye level. These spaces work because they tap into something primal, our brains still wired to associate greenery with safety, water with abundance. Yet the most fascinating experiments happen when cities fake it. Melbourne's urban forest strategy includes thousands of artificial trees equipped with misters that release eucalyptus-scented vapor, a placebo effect for nature deprivation. Bus shelters in Seoul project holograms of butterflies onto rainy sidewalks, tricking stressed commuters into smiling. Even the soundscape gets doctored. Berlin's subway stations now pipe in recordings of crickets and rustling leaves during rush hour, cutting down on shoving matches. It turns out we don't always need real nature, just enough cues to trigger the calm it provides. The irony: while skyscrapers and subways represent humanity's triumph over nature, the most effective tool for taming urban chaos might have been growing in the soil all along. From Vienna's rooftop vineyards that reduced domestic violence rates to Philadelphia's vacant lot cleanups that dropped gunshot wounds by nearly 30%, greenery does what police barricades and curfews never could. It heals the fractures that make control necessary. Maybe the future of cities isn't more concrete, but more chlorophyll control, not as restraint, but as a return to what our nervous systems never forgot. Barcelona's sidewalks tell stories their pedestrians never realize, not in cobblestones, but in data. Embedded sensors underfoot track foot traffic patterns, adjusting streetlight brightness to save energy while subtly encouraging nighttime strollers toward well-lit areas. Across the globe, in South Korea's Songdo, garbage bins scan RFID tags on trash bags, charging residents for exact waste volume, while AI adjusts traffic signals in real time to prevent gridlock. These aren't scenes from sci-fi, they're everyday life in so-called smart cities where efficiency wears the mask of convenience. But peel back that mask and you'll find a digital nervous system wired for control, one that knows where you pause, how fast you walk, even how long you linger at a bus stop. At first glance, the trade-offs seem benign. Who wouldn't want shorter commutes thanks to adaptive traffic algorithms or air quality sensors that reroute joggers away from pollution? The danger lies in the fine print, the silent transfer of power from public hands to corporate servers. Consider Toronto's abandoned Sidewalk Labs project, where Google's sister company proposed a neighborhood where every park bench would harvest Wi-Fi data, and snow-melting sidewalks doubled as surveillance grids. The backlash wasn't just about privacy, it exposed a fundamental shift. When private firms own the sensors that govern public space, democracy itself gets outsourced to boardrooms. Yet the most insidious control isn't what smart cities track, it's what they predict. In Singapore, AI analyzes CCTV feeds to flag suspicious loitering based on posture and movement long before any crime occurs. Dubai's smart police stations use emotion recognition software to scan faces for agitation, potentially detaining people for what they might do. This isn't just surveillance, it's pre-crime architecture where the city becomes a judge, jury, and executioner coded in algorithms. Defenders argue these systems are colorblind, class-blind, merely optimizing resources. But datasets have biases baked in like fossils. When predictive policing in Los Angeles disproportionately targeted Black and Latino neighborhoods, or when Amsterdam's welfare fraud algorithms falsely flagged immigrants, the message was clear. Smart cities often amplify old prejudices with new efficiency. Even seemingly neutral features, like dynamic pricing for toll roads that surge during rush hour, silently exclude lower-income drivers from city centers. The real paradox: these technologies often work. Energy use drops, traffic flows smoother, crime rates decline. But at what cost? When Barcelona activists hacked into city sensors to create a citizen dashboard revealing corporate data grabs, they proved alternatives exist, systems where transparency outweighs expediency. From Berlin's rejection of Google's smart city campus to Barcelona's municipal Wi-Fi network that bans behavioral tracking, pushback is brewing. The battle for smart cities isn't about tech versus Luddism. It's about who writes the code that writes our lives. Because when every park bench whispers to a server and every stoplight negotiates with your calendar, the city stops being a shared home and becomes a Panopticon with a user agreement. The question isn't whether urban life can be optimized, but whether we'll recognize humanity in the machine's reflection. Drive through the wrought iron gates of a luxury enclave outside Johannesburg, and you'll pass armed guards, biometric scanners, and streets named after European capitals. A carefully curated world where risk is designed out and homogeneity is the unspoken rule. These aren't just neighborhoods, they're fortresses of privilege where architecture doubles as a social filter. The walls surrounding them don't merely keep danger out, they enforce a silent hierarchy, ensuring only the right kind of people enjoy the manicured lawns and private golf courses. From Miami's waterfront compounds to Beijing's billionaire bunkers, gated communities have become the ultimate status symbol, selling safety while peddling segregation. But the psychological toll of these enclaves is rarely discussed. Researchers at the University of California found that residents behind walls actually report higher levels of anxiety than those in open neighborhoods. Constant surveillance, the pressure to conform to strict aesthetic rules, and the underlying fear that the barriers might fail create a paradox. The more secured the space, the more threatening the outside world seems. Children raised in these bubbles often develop what sociologists call luxury blindness. unable to navigate diverse public spaces without discomfort. The very walls meant to protect end up magnifying the divisions they're built to exclude. The ripple effects on cities are catastrophic. When wealth retreats behind gates, tax bases erode, public schools suffer, and infrastructure crumbles in excluded areas. In Lima, gated communities have privatized stretches of coastline, cutting off beach access for generations of fishermen. Johannesburg's suburbs now resemble medieval citadels, with some estates boasting their own schools, hospitals, and shopping centers, micro-cities that render public services obsolete for those who can afford to opt out. This isn't just urban planning, it's the architecture of inequality, brick by brick. Yet the most insidious design choices are the subtle ones. Guardhouses are often positioned to force eye contact with visitors, establishing dominance before entry. Streets curve deliberately to obscure the size of the community, creating illusions of exclusivity. Even landscaping plays a role. Thorny bushes beneath windows aren't just decorative, they're natural barbed wire. These details whisper a single message. You are either inside or outside, worthy or unworthy, safe or suspect. History offers grim parallels. The gated quarters of medieval Venice kept Jews confined after curfew, while colonial Cape Town's slave lodges used spatial isolation to enforce racial hierarchies. Modern gates may lack overt bigotry, but their effect is eerily similar: physical barriers that codify who belongs and who doesn't. The difference: today's walls are voluntary, paid for by those who believe privilege can be walled off from consequence. But cracks are appearing in the facade. In Sao Paulo, artists project slogans like "Your fear builds my walls" onto gated compound facades at night. Florida activists have successfully challenged ordinances that ban pedestrians near wealthy enclaves. And as climate change worsens, even the richest are discovering that no gate can stop rising floodwaters or wildfire smoke. A stark reminder that societal problems refuse to respect property lines. The true cost of these fortified bubbles isn't just the fragmentation of cities, it's the fragmentation of empathy. When you never share a sidewalk with someone unlike yourself, when public spaces become synonymous with danger, democracy itself weakens. Urban design can divide, but it can also heal. The choice between walls and bridges isn't just about concrete. It's about what kind of society we're building and who gets to walk through the door. In the shadow of towering skyscrapers and rigid city grids, something rebellious is stirring. It starts with a bucket of paint and a moonlit street, a group of neighbors transforming a dangerous intersection overnight with DIY crosswalks in neon yellow. By dawn, what was once a chaotic traffic free-for-all has become a safer passage, all without official permits or bureaucratic approval. This is tactical urbanism in action, citizens grabbing the reins of their built environment when those in power fail to act. The beauty of these grassroots interventions lies in their simplicity. Take the story of Bogotá's ghost bike lanes, where activists painted temporary cycling routes on busy avenues to prove demand for safer infrastructure. Within months, the city adopted permanent versions, turning guerrilla art into official policy. Or consider the parklet movement that began in San Francisco, where residents reclaimed parking spots with sod, benches, and potted plants, creating instant pocket parks that forced city planners to rethink street priorities. These aren't just protests, they're living blueprints for how neighborhoods could function if residents had real agency. What's fascinating is how these acts expose the hypocrisy of urban control. When a homeless advocacy group in Seattle installed makeshift shelters under highway overpasses, they were swiftly removed as hazards. Yet those same spaces sat empty for decades, collecting trash instead of helping people. Tactical urbanism holds up a mirror. If disorder is dangerous, why is neglect acceptable? From Budapest's illegal but beloved ruin bars to Lisbon's community-built staircases in neglected alleys, these interventions reveal a truth that people will fill voids left by indifferent systems, often with more creativity than any top-down plan. The most powerful examples blur the line between rebellion and renewal. In Detroit, blighted lots became urban farms through squatters' rights, feeding communities while greening the city. In Istanbul, artists transformed earthquake-damaged buildings into collaborative art spaces before bulldozers arrived. Even something as simple as yarn bombing knitting colorful sleeves around street poles softens the harsh edges of institutional neglect. These acts aren't just about fixing problems, they're about rewriting the social contract of who gets to shape shared space. Critics dismiss tactical urbanism as temporary or naive, but history suggests otherwise. New York's High Line began as a rogue garden on abandoned rails before becoming a world-class attraction. Copenhagen's pedestrian zones started as experimental street closures in the 1960s. The lesson, lasting change, often begins as civil disobedience, proof that when citizens lead with care rather than control, even bureaucracies eventually follow. Perhaps the deepest impact is psychological. Every time neighbors collaborate to build a bench where the city provided none, or paint a mural over gray concrete, they're doing more than decorating, they're declaring that streets belong to those who walk them, not just those who zone them. In an era of smart cities and surveillance, these small acts of defiance remind us that the most resilient urban designs aren't found in engineering manuals, but in the messy, magnificent creativity of people reclaiming their right to the city, one improvised intervention at a time. Stadiums and city squares might seem like open spaces for free movement, but look closer, their designs are masterclasses in crowd psychology. Take those gently sloped sidewalks near government buildings. They appear harmless, almost natural, but their incline serves a precise function: to prevent protesters from lingering too long or forming tight clusters. Even the choice of pavement matters. Rough cobblestones, though picturesque, are notoriously difficult to stand on for hours, subtly discouraging sit-ins. Meanwhile, smooth granite slabs in shopping districts invite steady foot traffic, guiding visitors like an invisible hand toward storefronts. Then there's the strategic placement of benches, those seemingly innocent spots to rest. Notice how they're often arranged in pairs, just enough for a quiet conversation but too small for a crowd to gather. Some cities take it further with rotating or uneven seating, making it impossible to lie down or stay comfortable for long. These aren't accidents, they're calculations. Urban planners call it defensive design, where every curve and corner is engineered to encourage certain behaviors while discouraging others. After the attacks of September 11th, this logic exploded into mainstream urban policy. Suddenly, bollards, those stout metal posts, sprang up outside courthouses and museums, disguised as art installations or sleek planter boxes. Decorative fountains doubled as barriers, their wide basins blocking vehicles without disrupting the aesthetic flow. Even flower beds became tactical tools, their raised edges acting as subtle deterrents to prevent unauthorized gatherings. The message was clear: security could be invisible, woven into the fabric of the city itself, but the most fascinating tools are the ones you don't see. Choke points, narrow passages in transit hubs or event spaces, are meticulously planned to slow and direct human traffic. Studies from crowd management experts reveal that people naturally avoid bottlenecks, so designers create intentional pinch points to control movement without alarms or gates. In emergencies, these same features can save lives by preventing stampedes, but in everyday use, they quietly herd crowds toward concessions, exits, or surveillance cameras. The paradox lies in how these measures balance safety with suppression. A plaza designed to disperse protests might also stifle spontaneous celebrations. Barriers meant to stop terrorists could alienate ordinary citizens, turning public spaces into fortresses. Yet some cities are pushing back. Barcelona's superblocks prioritize pedestrian freedom over control, while Copenhagen's shared spaces remove traffic signs entirely, forcing eye contact and cooperation between drivers and walkers. What emerges is a silent tug-of-war between the need for order and the right to gather, between security and spontaneity. Every bench, every slope, every bollard is a line in that negotiation. And the next time you pause in a square or navigate a crowded street, you might wonder, are you moving freely or being moved? The answer is often written in the pavement beneath your feet. Ever notice how milk and eggs are always tucked away in the farthest corner of the supermarket? That's no accident. It's a calculated detour, forcing you to weave through aisles of snacks and impulse buys just to grab the basics. Retailers call this the Gruen effect, named after architect Victor Gruen, who pioneered the idea that confusion can be profitable. By disorienting shoppers with winding layouts and endless displays, stores extend your stay, and the longer you linger, the more your cart fills. Even the flooring plays tricks. Plush carpeting in clothing sections slows you down, while sleek tiles near checkout lines speed you toward last-minute candy grabs. But the manipulation runs deeper than shelf placement. Step into any big box store and you'll realize there are no clocks or windows. The lighting is perpetually bright but slightly warmer near expensive items, casting them in a flattering glow. Music tempo shifts throughout the day, upbeat during rush hours to energize shoppers, then slowing in the afternoon to relax them into browsing, and those sale signs with red stickers. Their urgency is deliberate. Neuroscience studies show red triggers a mild stress response, pushing us to make quicker and often less rational decisions. Online shopping is no escape. Amazon's Goldilocks effect ensures you're always shown mid-priced items first, not the cheapest, not the most expensive, but the one that feels just right after a split-second comparison. Their warehouses, meanwhile, are labyrinths of efficiency, with algorithms dictating every worker's path to shave seconds off delivery times. Even the "customers also bought" feature is a trap, exploiting herd mentality to make you question your choices. The darkest magic happens at eye level. Supermarkets call it the bullseye zone, the space between waist and shoulders where products practically leap into your hands. Children's cereals hover at their sightlines, while premium brands pay top dollar for prime real estate. In caps, those displays at aisle ends aren't for clearance, they're for testing high-margin items under the guise of convenience. And those hand baskets, their small size isn't just practical, it's psychological. Once your arms tire, you'll abandon the basket for a cart, instantly tripling your shopping capacity. Yet the most insidious designs target your sense of autonomy. Limited time offers create artificial scarcity, while free samples trigger reciprocity, a primal urge to give back after receiving. Even the shopping cart's invention in the 1930s wasn't just about convenience. It was about scale. Suddenly, shoppers could carry 10 times as much, and retailers could stock 10 times as much. What's chilling is how these tricks mirror Skinner's behaviorist experiments, rewarding browsing with dopamine hits from finds, punishing hesitation with only 2 left. Warnings: the modern store isn't a space, it's a Skinner box dressed in fluorescent lighting. And every time you leave with 3 unplanned items, the design wins. But awareness is the first step to resistance. Next time you shop, try this. Touch nothing until you reach the milk. You'll see the strings, and maybe, just maybe, cut a few. Stand in the shadow of Notre Dame or beneath the minarets of Istanbul's Blue Mosque, and you'll feel it. The way sacred architecture doesn't just rise above a city, but shapes its very heartbeat. These structures were never meant to be mere backdrops. They're social engines disguised as stone and stained glass. Medieval European towns didn't cluster around churches by accident. The cathedral's spire was a compass needle, its bells marking time for markets, marriages, and curfews. Streets fanned outward like spokes on a wheel, ensuring every path led back to moral authority. Pilgrimage routes became trade routes, and the square outside the church doubled as a courtroom, theater, and town hall. The message was clear: faith wasn't just practiced here, it governed. Fast forward to Houston's sprawling megachurches, where parking lots dwarf football fields and cafes spill into auditoriums. These modern cathedrals use design to cultivate community on steroids. The absence of overt religious symbols, no crosses looming over the pulpit, no pews forcing rigid postures, isn't an oversight. It's a calculated embrace of comfort, with stadium seating and concert-grade acoustics making worship feel like a TED talk mixed with a rock show. The goal: to dissolve the boundary between sacred and social, turning Sunday service into a networking hub where spirituality shares space with parenting workshops and startup incubators. Yet this architectural evangelism has a shadow side. Gated parking lots with security checkpoints at some megachurches quietly signal who's welcome, while suburban mosques in Europe face zoning laws that limit minaret heights, a not-so-subtle curb on visibility. In Jerusalem, the clash of domes and spires tells a story of competing claims etched in stone, where every archway becomes a territorial marker. Even seemingly neutral features, like the direction of prayer halls or the placement of gender-segregated entrances, can silently enforce social divisions. The genius of sacred spaces lies in their dual language. They speak of transcendence while grounding communities in shared rhythm. Hindu temples in Mumbai double as disaster relief centers during monsoons. Synagogues along the Silk Road historically housed traveler inns above their sanctuaries, and the courtyard of Cairo's Al-Azhar Mosque has been a debating hall for scholars and street vendors alike for over 1,000 years. These spaces work because they're porous, allowing faith to spill into the mundane. But when does cohesion become control? The Spanish Inquisition used cathedral squares for public penance, turning architecture into a theater of shame. Puritan meeting houses in New England placed sinners in literal spotlight boxes. Today, critics argue that suburban megachurches replicate this exclusion through subtler means: membership cards for childcare, or sermons that equate financial giving with divine favor. The pews may be cushioned, but the gatekeeping remains. Perhaps the most fascinating evolution is happening in repurposed sacred spaces. London's churches turned into nightclubs, Barcelona's convents reborn as co-working hubs. These transformations aren't just about real estate. They're a rebellion against rigid moral geography. When stained glass watches over yoga classes or choir lofts become podcast studios, it proves that the walls never really dictated the spirit, people did. The next time you pass a place of worship, ask not just what's preached inside, but how its design preaches to the city outside. The answer might surprise you. Stroll through Boston's Faneuil Hall or London's Covent Garden, and you'll be charmed by the cobblestones, the gas lamp-style streetlights, the buskers in period costumes. But don't be fooled. These aren't living neighborhoods, they're carefully curated stage sets, what urban critics call festival marketplaces. Behind the wrought iron facades and artisanal sandwich boards, these spaces are often owned by multinational corporations. Their old-world aesthetics meticulously engineered to evoke nostalgia while scrubbing away anything too messy or real. The result, a kind of historical theme park where the past isn't preserved, it's packaged and sold by the square foot. Take the math behind these designs. The ideal festival marketplace sits exactly 2-3 miles from a major tourist attraction, close enough to draw foot traffic, but far enough to feel like a discovery. Storefronts are deliberately narrow, forcing crowds to spill into central plazas where they'll encounter street performers or pop-up vendors, all strategically placed to maximize impulse buys. Even the smells are orchestrated. Bakeries pump out cinnamon-scented air near entrances, triggering hunger cues, while coffee roasters position themselves downwind to lure visitors deeper into the maze. Every detail, from the width of sidewalks to the pitch of eaves, is calibrated to keep you browsing longer while believing you've stumbled upon some hidden gem. The irony is these spaces often replace the very authenticity they mimic. Before Covent Garden became a boutique shopping destination, it was a working fruit and vegetable market with noisy vendors and stained cobblestones. Faneuil Hall's revival in the 1970s displaced generations of immigrant-owned shops, replacing them with chain stores dressed in colonial drag. This isn't urban renewal, it's architectural lip-syncing, where the soul of a place gets replaced with a market-tested replica. What's lost goes beyond aesthetics. Real cities thrive on friction, the awkward encounters, the oddball shops that only locals frequent, the layers of history that aren't always photogenic. Festival marketplaces smooth all that out, offering a frictionless experience where the only surprises are the ones carefully focused, grouped in advance. The local ceramic shop might be a front for a warehouse in China, the historic pub owned by a hospitality conglomerate. Even the street performers often need permits and rehearsed routines, their spontaneity just another line item on an entertainment budget. Yet the most insidious effect is how these spaces rewrite urban memory. When children grow up thinking history means costumed reenactors and souvenir shops, they lose the ability to see the real layers beneath, the worn steps where actual workers once stood, the unglamorous spaces where life unfolded unscripted. Cities become backdrops rather than living organisms, their value measured in Instagram posts per hour rather than stories per generation. Resistance, though, is brewing. In Barcelona, activists have mapped out tourist exclusion zones where locals reclaim plazas overtaken by gelato chains. Berlin's Hackeschhof complex balances commercial spaces with artist studios and affordable housing, proving profit doesn't have to erase place. And in Portland, Oregon, a coalition of small businesses successfully lobbied for laws requiring ground-floor retail in historic districts to be locally owned, a small but vital check on corporate mimicry. The battle isn't against tourism or commerce, but against the lie that authenticity can be mass-produced. Next time you find yourself charmed by a quaint marketplace, ask who benefits from the illusion and what was erased to build it. The answer might make you see those picturesque cobblestones in a whole new light. Levittown's rows of identical Cape Cod houses weren't just a housing solution, they were a social experiment etched into freshly paved cul-de-sacs. Each 1,000-square-foot home with its picture window facing the street and kitchen tucked discreetly in back whispered the same message: this is how normal lives. Born from post-war America's desperate need for affordable housing, these suburban tracts promised the dream of ownership, but with strings woven into the very deeds. Racial covenants barred Black and Jewish families outright, while design guidelines dictated everything from laundry line placement to the acceptable shade of exterior paint. The uniformity wasn't accidental, it was ideology made visible, a physical manifesto for Cold War conformity. The genius or tragedy of this design lay in its subtle coercion. Front porches, once hubs of neighborly interaction in urban neighborhoods, vanished in favor of private backyards. Garages shifted from detached structures to attached focal points, signaling the car's new role as family patriarch. Streets curved endlessly to discourage through traffic, creating insular worlds where outsiders stood out instantly. Even the trees were planted at regimented intervals, their saplings provided by developers to ensure no homeowners' choices disrupted the collective aesthetic. This wasn't just architecture, it was behavioral scripting where every design choice nudged residents toward a prescribed version of middle-class life. But the exclusion ran deeper than aesthetics. Zoning laws in towns like Levittown mandated single-family homes on large lots, making apartments or mixed-use spaces illegal. Local governments used these rules like gatekeepers, ensuring property values, and by extension, the tax base remained high enough to price out undesirables. Schools were strategically placed at subdivision centers, forcing children to walk past manicured lawns that broadcast what success looked like. The result: a self-perpetuating cycle where homogeneity bred more homogeneity and deviation became unthinkable. The fallout reshaped America's social fabric. Suburban sprawl birthed car dependency, strangling public transit initiatives. The isolation of single-family zoning eroded community bonds, replacing stoop chats with garage door remote clicks. Most damningly, the wealth gap calcified as generations of excluded families missed out on equity growth. Levittown homes bought for $8,000 in the 1950s now fetch $500,000, but fewer than 2% of their owners are Black. Yet cracks are appearing in the suburban monolith. Younger generations are rejecting the isolation of sprawl for walkable neighborhoods, while cities like Minneapolis have banned single-family zoning altogether. Architects now retrofit McMansions into multi-generational co-housing, and activists challenge deed restrictions that still linger like ghosts in dusty property records. A picket fence hasn't vanished, but its power as a social straitjacket is fading, proof that even the most rigid designs can't withstand the messy, magnificent diversity of real human lives. Look up at any modern skyline and you'll see more than glass and steel. You'll see a social ladder cast in concrete. Skyscrapers, those glittering symbols of progress, have quietly become the ultimate architectural sorting machines, stacking wealth and poverty into neatly segregated layers. Take New York's so-called poor doors, separate entrances for affordable housing tenants, often tucked beside dumpsters or service alleys, while market-rate residents glide through marble lobbies. It's segregation with a keycard system where your floor number doubles as a class marker. Elevators, those unassuming metal boxes, reveal the hierarchy in motion. In luxury towers, private lifts whisk penthouse owners directly to their suites, bypassing the plebeian stops below. Meanwhile, service elevators become invisible highways for nannies, dog walkers, and delivery workers, essential labor kept literally behind the scene. The higher you ascend, the thinner the air gets, not just physically, but socially. Dubai's Burj Khalifa takes this to dizzying extremes. Its observation deck charges tourists for the privilege of peering down at the city, while the ultra-exclusive Armani residences occupy floors so high they're practically above the law. But the real magic trick is how these vertical castles sell isolation as exclusivity. Amenities are meticulously tiered: rooftop pools for the top floors, cramped gyms in the basement for everyone else. Some buildings even restrict access to certain elevators based on rent brackets, ensuring neighbors never accidentally rub shoulders. The message is clear: proximity doesn't mean connection. You might live inches apart through a concrete floor, but socially, you're worlds away. This isn't just about real estate, it's about rewriting urban psychology. Studies from the London School of Economics found that high-rise residents report fewer chance encounters with neighbors than those in walk-ups, fracturing community bonds. Without stoops or shared courtyards, interactions become transactional, mediated by doorman and delivery apps. The very design that promises efficiency breeds atomization, turning cities into honeycombs of solitude. Yet the most insidious effect is how these towers reshape the ground beneath them. As glass spires multiply, they cast literal and metaphorical shadows, displacing long-time residents, hiking rents in their orbit and turning sidewalks into wind tunnels. The view from the top isn't just a privilege, it's a vantage point from which inequality can be ignored. When your morning begins 80 stories above street level, the struggles of the city shrink to abstraction. But resistance is growing. Activists in Toronto have shamed developers into abolishing poor doors, while Barcelona taxes vacant luxury units to fund social housing. Architects like Yasmin Lowry are flipping the script, designing high-rises with communal kitchens and vertical gardens that prioritize connection over exclusion. Because a city that stacks people like cargo might reach the clouds, but it'll never touch humanity. Copenhagen's Strøget, Europe's longest pedestrian street, seems like a triumph for urban liberation. Cars banished, sidewalks widened, cafes spilling freely into open spaces. But watch closely and you'll notice who's missing. The flower vendors who once dotted the curbs, the buskers whose music once ricocheted off medieval walls, the immigrant elders who used to gather on benches now replaced by sleek, slope-topped ledges. Pedestrianization, for all its charm, often comes with an invisible broom, sweeping away the messy humanity it claims to celebrate. The irony is hard to miss. These car-free zones are sold as democratic spaces, yet their design quietly enforces a hierarchy of access. Take Barcelona's superblocks, where bollards and planters exclude vehicles, but also police behavior. Homeless sleepers find their usual corners suddenly studded with decorative rocks, while street performers face decibel limits and timed permits. Even the width of walkways plays a role. Zurich's Bahnhofstrasse, once a bustling mix of shoppers and protesters, now funnels foot traffic past luxury storefronts with military precision, its benches angled to discourage lingering. What begins as freedom for pedestrians often ends as a curated experience where only certain kinds of movement and certain kinds of people are truly welcome. Commerce drives these transformations more than any urban planner would admit. When Oslo pedestrianized its city center, property values near the new walkways spiked by 30%, pushing out family-owned shops in favor of international chains. The same pattern repeats from Melbourne to Montreal. Pedestrian malls become outdoor shopping malls, their cobblestones polished smooth for credit card-wielding tourists rather than weathered by the footsteps of locals. Informal economies, from street food carts to flea markets, get branded as clutter and relocated to invisible side alleys if they're allowed at all. Yet some cities prove alternatives exist. Tokyo's scramble intersections, where pedestrians flood the streets en masse during red lights, create temporary utopias of equality, brief moments where salarymen and schoolchildren share the same asphalt. Venice's labyrinth of walkways, forged by necessity rather than design, forces strangers into unscripted encounters at every dead-end canal. And in Medellin, pedestrian escalators carved into hillside slums don't just move bodies, they stitch fractured communities together, proving walkability isn't just for the wealthy. The tension lies in the word pedestrian itself. It can mean both a person walking and something dull, ordinary. Too often, cities design for the second definition, stripping streets of spontaneity in the name of safety or efficiency. But the best public spaces aren't just pathways, They're stages for the unpredictable drama of urban life. A truly liberated street doesn't just ban cars. It makes room for the old man playing chess on a milk crate, the teenager spray painting a legal mural, the impromptu tango that stops traffic without apology. The question isn't whether pedestrianization is good or bad, but who gets to dance in the space it creates, and who gets told to move along. From Bentham's Panopticon to facial recognition cameras, the story of cities has always been a tug of war between order and autonomy, between those who design the stage and those who must live on it. But as algorithms replace iron bars and predictive policing outpaces actual crime, we've reached a crossroads. The invisible hands shaping our streets no longer belong to just kings or urban planners. They're wielded by tech giants, data brokers, and policymakers who have turned public space into a living laboratory. Consider this: when a sidewalk camera can predict a protest before it happens, or a bench's design dictates who's allowed to rest, who really holds the keys to the city. The danger isn't just surveillance, it's complacency. For centuries, we've mistaken control for safety, segregation for order. Gated communities promise security but breed isolation. Smart traffic systems prioritize commuters over cyclists. Even something as simple as a park's closing time sends a message about who belongs after dark. These choices aren't neutral. They're valued judgments cast in concrete, reinforcing who gets comfort, who gets scrutiny, and who gets left out entirely. Yet history shows us that design isn't destiny. Look at how activists in Barcelona reclaimed alleyways with guerrilla gardens, or how Tokyo's homeless communities transformed underpasses into vibrant art galleries. From Detroit's urban farms to Lisbon's citizen-built staircases, people have always found ways to hack the system, proving that cities are dialogues, not monologues. The real power lies in recognizing these scripts and deciding whether to perform, improvise, or tear them up entirely. So here's the challenge: next time you cross a street, pause. Notice the width of the sidewalk, the angle of the security camera, the absence or abundance of shade trees. Ask who benefits from this design and who suffers. Because the future of cities isn't just in the hands of architects or algorithms. It's in our footsteps, our voices, our collective refusal to accept spaces that don't serve us all. The blueprint for change starts with seeing the invisible ink. If this journey through the secret language of cities has shifted your perspective, hit like and subscribe to uncover more hidden forces shaping the world around us. The next time you walk through a doorway, remember, you're not just entering a building, you're stepping into a story. Let's make sure it's one worth telling.